Let me just say, I'm an old governor, recovering governor, and a recovering state treasurer. I go home to Delaware almost every night. I'll go to Salisbury, Maryland tonight. I'll go to every county in Delaware tonight, just in one night.
Almost every?
Everyone, north to south to north. And so I try to stay really in touch with my state. And we up in northern Delaware, we get, I think 1 out of every 6 families in Delaware gets their drinking water from a private well, 1 out of 6. Northern Delaware, a lot of us get our drinking water from surface water. There's a creek, or actually there's a river called Brandywine, which flows from Pennsylvania down into Delaware. And my family, that's where our water comes from for the city of Wilmington. And we have water that comes out of Pennsylvania, the Christina River. It's a source of drinking water for folks as well in my state. Currently, if an entity, I don't know if it's a utility or company or business or whatever, that puts pollution into the Brandywine River, or the Christina River in Pennsylvania, and it comes down and we end up having to clean it up. Just, it's bad for us to drink. We have a remedy for that. However, under what I think is before us, and I want to ask Frank and Anthony to tell us, but I just understand what's before us. If that polluter in Pennsylvania decides not to pollute, to put the pollution in the Brandywine or in the Christina, but to put it like 100 feet away, and the pollution travels underground and ends up in the Brandywine or the Christina River, then we're, pardon my French, screwed. And am I reading this right? Am I reading this right or wrong? Ms. Hellman?
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's what they're proposing. They're proposing that if it travels any distance with groundwater, Clean Water Act doesn't cover it. And that the discharge point has to be literally in the river or right on top of it, right above it. This is one, in that famous Rapanos decision, this is one thing every justice agreed on, including Justice Scalia, that is not the law. Instead, the Clean Water Act protects any pollution that comes from a point source. And if this interpretation were adopted, we'd roll the clock back on these protections that we have enjoyed and hopefully will enjoy more in the future from the Clean Water Act.
Let me say to my colleagues, these two fellows love their state. They have great states, and they're wonderful servants for their states. Not every state has people who are going to be running their Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control, Environmental Protection, who has the kind of commitment that I think those of us on this panel have to clean air, clean water, and enforcements. There's a great temptation when a polluter is in violation of state laws. And we'll say maybe it could be a utility. It could be a large company that has a lot of employees. When they're confronted by state legislators and say, you got to stop what you're doing. And the polluter can say, I could be doing this business in some other states. I could be running my business in some other state and push back. And I don't care if it's a utility, I don't care if it's a major employer. And you have regulatory agencies that basically use kid gloves on these folks. Am I reading this wrong? Where the question is, do we have state laws that protect us? Well, we do have state laws, but a lot of them, frankly, are not very well enforced by the regulatory agency. Am I wrong, Mr. Brown?
Yes, as I mentioned during my testimony, there are thousands of contaminant plumes in groundwater currently in the United States that have yet to be fully addressed. That's a function of a variety of factors. Notably, in some cases, the polluter makes no attempt to address them and tries to obstruct it. But also we have a regulatory structure in some states that's overburdened. There are numerous projects that regulators have to address, and they have to direct their resources. So therefore, some plumes just do not get appropriately addressed. And the regulatory tools they have, such as CERCLA, are very arduous and burdensome processes that take a very long time to actually institute any kind of restoration or remediation. It may take many years, if not decades, to actually achieve restoration under such programs.
This just is. One, if I could, for Mr. Hallman, and now I'll ask you to be brief in your response. But did the Fourth Circuit hold that the groundwater itself is the point source, or was the point source the ruptured pipeline that spilled several 100,000 gallons of gasoline? Would you elaborate on the distinction there, please?
Yes, as you know, the Fourth Circuit is a court of appeals that covers the Southeast, including where I live. And the Fourth Circuit clearly held groundwater is not a point source. It is not a water of the United States. The point source was the pipe that broke 1,000 feet uphill from a stream and dumped 369,000 gallons of gasoline, which is flowed and is still flowing into that creek. That's what the Fourth Circuit held. The pipe was a point source, but it was discharging into that tributary of the Savannah River.
Yeah, just for a clarification, would you agree then that Mr. Gill's fears about the, quote, lost progress from the recent court decisions concerning the waters of the U.S. are misplaced?
Yes, I'm sympathetic to my friend here because my wife and I also own a farm with cows on it, and we've also cattle on it, and we've also done the NRCS program.
I like cows. I like when you say cows.
Cattle. Well, these are cattle. These aren't cows. Nobody makes them. And so I'm sympathetic to his work, but I do not think the fears expressed are real. And in fact, on my farm or his, what he just described, we don't have anything to fear.
All right. I would just say, Mr. Chairman, and to Senator Inhofe, a couple of days ago, I had the privilege of being on a farm in southern Delaware, and we were there, and the NRCS was there as well. And we had, they weren't raising cattle on the farm. I think they were raising some grain crops and chickens. But they were doing great work with the help of the NRCS. They equipped funding that you mentioned with the buffers and all kinds of stuff. So I applaud you, Mr. Gill, for taking advantage of those wonderful programs. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record several documents that support the proposition that pollution from a discrete point source traveling through groundwater that is hydrologically connected to regulated water, surface water, is covered by the Clean Water Act. I ask that unanimously.
Without objection, and